New at 10, the community reacts to a Lauderdale County judge indicted today by the Attorney General. Judge Gilsef is charged with 16 counts of using his office for personal gain or the gain of family members.
Now, if Self is convicted of these charges, he faces up to 20 years in prison and $30,000 in fines for each of the 16 charges he faces.
So this judge is facing over 300 years in prison, and he still won't resign. This is Judge Gilbert P. Self from the great state of Alabama. So Judge Self started serving as a judge in 2009 and got a promotion to serve as the presiding judge of the 11th Judicial Circuit. Now in Alabama, each judicial circuit in the state has a presiding judge's fund that may be expanded for support of local court operation. This includes things like salaries and benefits for court employees, and they also have a catch-all for other expenses as individually determined necessary by the presiding circuit judge. That's Judge Self. And it's to promote the efficient administration of justice. And there's a citation to the Alabama law where this comes from. Now, to even make it more clear, the law then goes on to state the presiding judge has sole supervision over the presiding judge's fund and must authorize all expenditures from the presiding judge's fund. So now, since the money in that presiding judge's fund are public funds, the state of Alabama wants to make sure they're being spent appropriately. So the state of Alabama sent auditors to look at the presiding judge's fund and the law library fund, another fund that the judge had control over. So the audit report was filed on October 6, 2023, and this is what the auditors found. Between July 1st, 2019 and July 31st, 2023, about a 4-year time period. So in the presiding judge's fund, there was about $200,000 during that time period. And the auditor said that $112,000 was unallowable or undocumented expenditures. Now, the charging documents give some examples of what Judge Self was actually spending the money on. Like, for instance, Judge Self was writing checks to himself and others. He was buying personal meals, alcohol, and personal travel with the money.
That audit found Self spent over $146,000 of county money on unallowed expenses, such as employing his son, buying a sofa, purchasing alcoholic beverages, golf clubs, eyeglasses, frames, guns, ammunition, kitty litter, and more. The records also show Self used the funds to reimburse himself on a variety of vacation trips.
They say that Self also lied to auditors and the grand jury. Among the charges is that in at least 2 cases, Self took court money to pay for judicial ethics and mindfulness conferences that he did not attend.
So now, after the audit came out, the judge was writing checks to himself, writing checks to friends, buying kitty litter with public funds. The prosecutor believed there may have been a crime committed and presented this evidence to a grand jury. This is what happened.
A developing story out of Lauderdale County. Circuit judge has been indicted on multiple counts of using his office for personal gain.
New at 10, the community reacts to a Lauderdale County judge indicted today by the Attorney General. Judge Gilsef is charged with 16 counts of using his office for personal gain.
This is breaking news.
We have breaking news out of the Shoals this noon. 11th Circuit Court Judge Gilbert Self is facing numerous criminal charges after a state audit that showed over $100,000 in undocumented or unallowed expenses. Now, Lauderdale County Sheriff Joe Hamilton says Judge Gilbert turned himself into the sheriff's office at around 10:30 this morning. Hamilton says a Lauderdale County grand jury indicted Self on 16 counts of use of position for personal gain, 1 count of perjury, and 1 count of examiner's audit false representation.
Now, at the end of that, you heard perjury charges, but those perjury charges were specifically because he illegally hired his son to work at the courthouse.
Prosecutors say he lied to the grand jury about receiving permission to hire his son, and he faces 1 count of lying to auditors during their review. Prosecutors say Self hired his son for a $50,000 a year law library job without proper permission. Prosecutors say Self told the grand jury he had spoken to a library board member about the job, but he later told investigators, they say, that he didn't know if the library board was aware of the payments to his son.
Now, before Judge Self was indicted, he did reimburse the state for every penny the audit said he took unlawfully.
During last year's audit, state officials say Self paid back the unallowed expenses in full.
Judge Self then made a public statement. He wanted to tell people this was all a big misunderstanding.
Self also issued a statement today saying, in part, he looks forward to the community reviewing the case against him. He went on to say, from the first time the auditors brought these issues to my attention, I've acknowledged honest but correctable mistakes were made into 2 bank accounts I administered as presiding judge. These mistakes happened over a period of time when our court system was under immense pressure due to the pandemic and being understaffed and overloaded. At no time did I intend to violate any law. He went on to say, Lauderdale County is not out any money, and all of the money in question is in those accounts. Nothing can change the mistakes I made, and my embarrassment and regret are painful realities.
Now, in the United States, we have what's known as the presumption of innocence. So the judge is technically innocent until he's proven guilty in a court of law. So now that puts us in a quandary. Do you want to have a judge who's facing 16 felony counts presiding over cases? So the court system came up with a solution. They'll pay the judge's salary, but will not let him hear cases.
As for Self's court cases this week, the Lauderdale County Courthouse officials say other judges will be helping handle his caseload. Tomorrow morning, a criminal pre-trial hearing on the docket will be taken up by Judge Graves.
Judge Self has only been indicted, not convicted. So while he isn't able to serve as a judge, he's still receiving a salary every 2 weeks. State records show he's been paid $29,000 overall since his indictment in late January.
Now, I think I have to make this clear. This judge is facing 16 felony counts, and each one of those felony counts can get him up to 20 years in prison if served consecutively.
Now, if Self is convicted of these charges, he faces up to 20 years in prison and $30,000 in fines for each of the 16 charges he faces.
So now with all these criminal charges, the Judicial Inquiry Commission of the state of Alabama also brought ethics complaints against this judge. They're looking to have the judge thrown off the bench, and then let's not forget, he is a lawyer, so he has to worry about his law license. The Bar Association will likely be calling soon. So now, how do you feel about this case? On one hand, the judge paid everything back.
During last year's audit, state officials say Self paid back the unallowed expenses in full.
But on the other hand, look how recklessly he was spending taxpayer money.
Such as employing his son, buying a sofa, purchasing alcoholic beverages, golf clubs, eyeglasses, frames, guns, ammunition, kitty litter, and more. The records also show Self used the funds to reimburse himself on a variety of vacation trips.
And I don't know if he pays any of that back if they didn't catch him with his hands in a cookie jar because of the audit. And then let's not forget about the alleged lies to the grand jury and the alleged lies to the auditors. Now, on one end, you can make the argument that there is really no victim here, right? The state got all of its money back. But that's like saying if I rob a bank and then a year later return the money, then I should be forgiven for robbing the bank. And I do love how the judge is blaming the pandemic. Like, that pandemic was a crazy time.
These mistakes happened over a period of time when our court system was under immense pressure due to the pandemic and being understaffed and overloaded.
Now, I don't understand how the judge can make this argument. Number one, a lot of that money just went to him. He was paying himself in checks, and he would pay some family members in checks, and the money would come back to him, allegedly. So I don't know how he can blame the pandemic on something like that. And they were buying things like kitty litter. So at the end of the day, you have a judge who's facing 16 felony counts, refuses to resign, and is waiting his fate in court. But he is innocent until proven guilty, and the state still has to pay him while they wait to see if he's convicted. Now, let's just be real. The judge would have had to pay that money back if convicted anyway. And also, you can look at paying back that money in a different way. That's consciousness of guilt. He knew that money wasn't his. That's why he paid it back in full. So let me know how you feel about the crazy judge with 16 felony counts of taking money from the state. Do you think he should do some jail time? Do you think this is probation? How do you feel about him paying every penny back? Does it show he's more guilty or less guilty of the criminal charges? If you don't remember, I'm trying to remind you now. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe. Do all that great YouTube stuff. My name is Nathaniel, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.